Cow and chicken.
Cow and chicken.
Wow. Yeah, that's a pretty deep cut. I don't think anyone has literally ever brought that up in an interview ever.
Well, you're welcome. Keeping it fresh. With all due respect,
Yeah.
Conan, you haven't dealt with Starbutts.
So good.
It's you guys are not ready. I'm just going to tell you that.
Oh, we're
But
live.
So,
Oh,
Yeah.
shit.
oh,
oh god, we're
Oh, wait.
live.
Oh, thanks, Leo, for the warning.
Leo,
I'm smoking.
behind the scenes, everything's coming out now. Oh my God.
you're on, Jim.
All right.
Shut
Hey,
up.
I'm Jim Zub, the writer of Samurai Jack, Dungeons and Dragons, Conan the Barbarian, and a little struggling title called The Avengers. And you are watching or listening to Splash Pages.
Hey, happy Tuesday, everybody. You are watching Splash Pages. My name is Leo. I'm the monkey behind the keyboard here. We have an incredible show for you scheduled as always. And with us, we'll pop it on over to Kari. How's it going?
It's going great. We've got some Maker's Mark. We've got a wonderful guest on tonight, and we're going to have some talk about D&D because we just found out that he is an avid player as well. And so Mahana and I are just like, "Yee!" Speaking of which, my girl's on the show tonight. We get to hang out with her again. The cheeriest goth. Let's go check on her.
Hi guys, good to be back. Yes, I am the cheeriest of the goths, build of the cosplayer. And honestly, just really, really pleased to be back.
Mr. Drew.
Leo, you are the worst stage manager I have ever worked with. Okay? You don't even tell us we're on. We're talking, and then suddenly, oh shit, we're on. You are the worst. Seriously, not recommending you for that, buddy. Hi, everybody. It's Tuesday, and you're back again. So thank you. And if you have mistakenly found us, please stay. We could really use the company. I don't know. So we have a fantastic guest. I got to meet him years ago. It was a super experience. Really glad he's here because we're going to talk about a ton of stuff. He already mentioned Samurai Jack. We're going to talk about all his work on Conan, D&D, the Avengers. There's a bunch of other things as well. We're going to mine a couple of gems, have a lot of laughs. Everybody, the one, the only, the all-powerful and totally following all of Arnold's Conan rules, Jim Zub.
Hey, my gosh, that's quite the lead in. I don't know if I can live up to that, but I will attempt to. Thank you
Do your
for
best.
having me. It's
Oh, no,
appreciated.
absolutely.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah, thank you
Quite
for
the-
joining. And my apologies, pushing us live a couple minutes early. I know
Yeah.
Drew can really get, on a rampage, so it's tough to break in at times. So I figured, just push us live. We'll get some magic.
Slide on in there, real subtle.
Oh,
No worries.
wait. I like how this is somehow my fault. You are deflecting hard, and I don't like it. So you're embarrassing me in front of our guest, who we were able to get back on the show after last time. Don't do this to me, man. This is not fun.
Just think it's a small payback for Mark Wade. Just a small one.
You embarrassed yourself for Mark Wade. That had nothing to do with me. I have said this before. If you want to live better, you need to do better. This has nothing to do with Jim. Do not punish him for those sins.
True.
Stop it. Focusing on Jim. Thank you for coming on.
That was really
embarrassed in front of the guests. It's
These guys never come back. It's like, yeah, they're a little intense. But I guess I'll just start. Jim, I have to say this. I've never read anything of Conan up until having you on the show.
Oh, cool.
I have one thing I have to ask, and I was talking to MJ about this. Why is it that all of you guys, when you have scenes of underground tribulations and stuff, why is there always a giant spider? Why?
I mean,
Always.
Why does that
Always.
happen? Just because I'm seeing it and I'm like, this is again another reason I will never go 20,000 leagues under anywhere, because there's always a giant spider and I'm terrified.
I mean, the key here is that in the Hyborian age, every critter is going to be gigantic. Everything's going to be crawly and nasty, and
True.
it's not
That's
just
true.
a lizard; it's a giant lizard. It's not just a scorpion; it's a giant scorpion. Like it's
Mhm.
just the way it has to be. So
I
Giant
get it.
scorpion
Get
with
used to it.
somehow swords.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's
Really-
genre appropriate. That's
Oh
right.
no, it was, but I'm just
100%
like,
is.
again, never read any Conan, loving it. The Crucible was fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, it was great. And then the Bloodstone also great. And we we wanted to read your Conan at different points and just kind of like,
Thanks.
oh,
Yeah.
this is this
I mean,
Conan,
it's
this is that
amazing
Conan.
to me that I have Conan at different points. That's one of the things that's kind of mind bending to me. Like I grew up on obviously Marvel superheroes, Conan the Barbarian, and Dungeons and Dragons, and other role playing games. So getting to contribute to all these things, getting to be a part of them, is honestly
Mhm.
a dream come true. It's been really phenomenal experience. The first chance I actually had to write Conan was thanks to my friend Gail Simone. She did.
Oh,
There was a
nice.
crossover with Red Sonja and Conan that they did when the character was still licensed at Dark Horse. So that's like
Hmm.
2016. And that was a really amazing experience. And I thought that would be my only chance ever to be a bard for the Barbarian. And lo and behold, here we are years later. And now I've got my hand on the steering wheel of the franchise and I could not be happier. So it is a real pleasure to be able to put this stuff together. The pages you're currently seeing, that was from my Marvel. So that was 2020 into 2021. I got to write the monthly book after Jason Aaron on the character return to Marvel, which was a real blast. And obviously, with lockdowns and everything else, it was one of the weirdest times of all of our lives. And I thought, again, that would be it. That would be my only shot to write the big guy. And lo and behold, after things wrapped up at Marvel, there was another. The rights holders of Conan, they're at a company now called Heroic Signatures, and
Hmm.
they really liked what I had done. They thought I had a really good voice for the character and had some cool ideas. So they asked me if I would be interested in pitching. It's something called a bake off where you have multiple writers pitching to, on their concepts on a project. So I pitched for this new initiative that we're doing at Titan, and was able to. I felt like I was the dark horse there because I had just done it at Marvel, but kind of came out swinging and was able to keep that diamond. And I've been writing Conan ever since that relaunch in 2023.
Nice. Uh,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. But is there like, well, first thing was, I'm just imagining like this like Conan Bake Off and some Gordon Ramsay-ish editor just
Yeah, it's
judging the
definitely
script.
it's just like the British, Grand Bake Off. It's the exact same thing. We're all in one room and there's
Really?
a clock and there's a stove running. It's a really weird experience. You're trying to put all the barbarian stuff in the pan and just get it in the oven before it's too
Right.
late. No,
It's
it's cool. As long as I know ahead of time that that's the situation. The only thing that sucks in an industry, and this was not the case here with Conan, but if you think you're the only person pitching on a project, then you find out later you're like, oh, it was in competition. Oh, okay. Crazy. So in this case, it was like pretty clear up front that they were casting a wide net, just
Mhm.
to see different concepts and see what was possible out there. So I definitely went in with my eyes open and
Yeah.
doing everything I could to bust it out.
Regarding
So
writing Conan, is there anything like, what do you feel is like quintessential for anybody who wants to approach writing Conan, being that he's kind of,
Sure.
kind of an enigma in modern comics? I mean, you have this character that I always feel like is like the birth child of like Frank Frazetta, this
Well,
this this
there's
barbarian,
heroes. I mean, the
in modern
reality is,
comics is still the thing,
yeah,
you know?
here's the thing though. The character is, I think, older and more influential than a lot of people realize. So
Mhm.
Conan as a character is older than Superman by six
Oh,
years. He established the
wow.
sword and sorcery genre. Well, his the creator, Robert E. Howard, in the pulps and Weird Tales magazine, established the sword and sorcery genre. It wasn't even called that at the time because it didn't exist. And Conan became sort of the bedrock of that genre of writing in
Mhm.
the pulps. And it went through a surge of popularity up until his death. And then it sort of, there were reprints and things through the 30s and into the 40s, but it sort of lost quite a bit of steam. And then the Frank
Mhm.
Frazetta stuff that you're bringing up was in the 60s. So what happened was there were two different companies, depending on what region of the world you're in, either Lancer or Ace. They had the paperbacks, and they got new covers, those Frank Frazetta covers, which created a brand new vision of the character and really kind of created the icon visually that people think of to this day as being Conan. Two different authors, L. Sprague de Camp, and another author named Lynn Carter. They came in and they did a reworking of a bunch of the original texts, and those paperbacks sold literally millions of copies and kind of put the character back on the map. Marvel, came into their own in the through the 60s, and then into the 70s, they were trying to branch out into all kinds of different genres. Superheroes are obviously the mainstay now, but Marvel had previously done Westerns and horror comics and romance comics and things like that. And so they were trying to branch out. And one of the things that was on their radar was doing fantasy stuff or potentially sword and sorcery. And Roy Thomas ended up, through a series of kind of lucky events and good contacts, was able to get the rights for Conan for the comics. And through the 70s, Marvel was actually in a bit of a rough spot, and between Amazing Spider-Man, Star Wars, and Conan the Barbarian, that really kept them going strong. Those were three of the biggest books at Marvel all the way through the 70s, including the spin-off black and white magazine Savage Sword of Conan, which was able to create a whole different kind of it was huge for them because the magazine didn't have to follow the Comics Code Authority, so it could be more violent and more titillating than what you would get in the monthly book. And it had a really strong hold on the adult readership that was just into it and excited to see those stories kind of unleashed. And so, yeah, it is a huge legacy. It's a huge legacy in terms of character and in terms of comics. Over 50 years now in comics, and being a part of that is awesome. I think a lot of people, they assume just the broadest of cliches. Oh, he's just a big, dumb, strong guy who kills stuff and saves, hot women or whatever. And it's like, the reality is, if you go right back to the original source material and you really dig into those pulps, first of all, they're almost all short stories. So most of them you can read in one sitting. They're very short. They're very simple. The whole point is to get in and entertain you as quickly as possible. They're impressively lyrical, which is kind of nice. They've got a really cool turn of a phrase and some beautiful language to them. And there's this core kind of drumbeat, this theme that runs through all the major, all the best Robert E. Howard original stories, which is this idea of civilization versus savagery, and not in the way that you might think. The idea that although Conan is a barbarian and he's this outsider and he's this whatever uncouth, uncultured, barbarian, that he is actually the one who is trustworthy, is honorable, is forthright, and does exactly what he says he's going to do. Yes, he would definitely cut you down, but the reality is, if he says he will stand by your side, or if he says don't cross this line, he means every word he says. Unlike the civilized, the religions of and the government people and the sort of duplicitous people who'll do anything to get what they want or stab you in the back, and say one thing to your face and then do something else. And so there's this really interesting kind of undercurrent and theme to the whole thing. And if you want to have kind of Conan stories that are more than just the base level kind of ingredients and the kind of veneer of sword and sorcery, if you can dig into that heart a little bit deeper, this idea of civilization versus savagery, or some of the moral kind of quandaries and difficulties, you can make something really potent. There's a reason why a character like this is an icon and has stuck around so long. There's a reason why anytime someone makes a barbarian story, they're either leaning into or leaning away from Conan, because he is the template. So even the act of making a character who is not like Conan is a choice that you have to make, because the character takes up so much space, like a Superman, like a Batman, like a Spider-Man, that these characters are icons for a reason, and the wandering warrior kind of tropes and everything involved with it,
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
So when you think of barbarian, one of the first people think of is Conan.
Yeah, absolutely. There are very few characters that have the global kind of identity that he does in fantasy, like easily a top 10, top 5 character around the world in terms of fantasy. Yeah, and you can say, if you go to your average person on the street and you say, name a fantasy character, they may say, oh, the Hobbits, but like your average person, I'm not talking at a convention or something like that, they may not know Frodo or Bilbo, or they might, they won't know Strider or whatever, any of that kind of stuff. But Conan still has that name. It's got that cachet as a singular kind of a force of a character.
Yep.
And whenever you get the chance to work on one of those icons, it is definitely a pinch me kind of moment. I certainly don't take it for granted. It is it's an amazing and intimidating experience. Yeah.
The character is larger than life, and it's really, like you said, iconic, and it was wonderful. I really enjoyed reading it.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. And it's fascinating to me because obviously, like, working on the character when it came back to Marvel, that was a weird experience because of the nature of the lockdowns and everything else. And then when it wrapped up there, it's, what was fascinating is doing the new relaunch at Titan and being able to bring a whole new kind of take on it and really start from this ground kind of floor in 2023, relaunch the book and bring in a whole new host of new readers. I'm not sure if you're just going to be flipping through the Marvel stuff. I hope you get around to showing the Titan stuff as well. Has been really potent for me because I think a lot of people that overlooked the stuff I was doing at Marvel are now able to kind of see get to come on board in a really strong way. And in some ways it's kind of benefited my earlier stuff where people have gone back that haven't had a chance to read it and went, oh, actually you can see kind of me gaining more confidence and me understanding more about the character and getting a stronger handle on the Hyborian age and the kind of voice and the kind of lyricism that I think makes the character more than the sum of his parts. You know what I mean? So absolutely.
I'm gonna hit the comments here real quick.
Sure.
We have Salty Traveling Sea says Howard was one of the most important American proto-fantasy writers, not just Conan, but Solomon Kane and his boxing stories. I think he picked up where Jack London left off.
Absolutely. He wrote horror stories. He wrote, sorry. Go ahead.
That's right. Howard's criticism of civilization manifests continually through Conan, and also just received by Jim signed FCBD from Third Eye. Excellent.
Oh, awesome. So, yeah. Howard wrote all kinds of different genre stuff. He wrote noir, he wrote horror, he wrote detective stories, he wrote boxing stories and Westerns. If he would have lived longer, I have no doubt that he would have, he still created a phenomenal amount of material and characters, Kull the Conqueror and Solomon Kane and Kirwan and Conrad and just on and on and on in terms of what he was able to produce in a very short span of time. And if he had lived longer, I have no doubt that more and more of the characters that he would have made in terms of whatever cowboys and survivors and conquistadors and all sorts of pirates and things that he was touching upon or just starting to get his footing with would have been that much stronger. And it's fascinating because there are, depending on how you want to measure it, 21 22 Conan stories that were published written by Howard, but there's also a host of he wrote way more boxing stories than he did Conan stories. He wrote way more Westerns, but those weren't the ones that made him, famous. And so it's kind of fascinating when you look at different aspects of his career. He wrote hundreds of poems, which is another thing that most people don't think about or realize as well. So it's an amazing legacy to even be a tiny part of, and to at this moment be sort of at the crux of trying to not just bring back those kind of lapsed readers. There's a massive audience, like I said, that was collecting it through the 70s and the 80s, but also to try and keep that flame alive and keep people surprised and hopefully bring in a whole host of new readers as well on the material.
Well, and you brought up something that today I learned. Lynn Carter, I always just associate him with Lovecraft because I'm a big Lovecraftian mythos fan, and everything I've read of his has been Lovecraft. So now I found out, oh wow, he wrote Conan. So I'm gonna have to go and check out some of that because he has some great writing.
Well, what's fascinating is that because Sprague de Camp, he was one of the people who was sort of overseeing the estate of Robert E. Howard and all the works. And once the stuff started to get popular again, he was sort of going in and editing or adjusting the material to try and make a tighter timeline for it. And the fandom kind of has gone through love and hate, relationships with that material. It popularized it, like with the Frazetta covers and everything else, but it is pretty heavily edited and adjusted from the original text that Howard wrote. And it wasn't until, I know it sounds crazy, 1999, that a lot of the original Howard stories, the same ones that you would have read in Weird Tales, were available in like actual published books, unadjusted, unedited. So for years and years and years, this stuff was tied up in all sorts of weird legal rights and
Cool.
trouble. The rights for multiple characters were diffused across multiple rights holders, and now they've all kind of been back together under one roof, which gives us a lot more flexibility and a lot more power to be able to use them. And hopefully, like the rising tide raising all ships, that Conan is that flagship character everyone knows. But if I do a good job and we can build out this line, other characters like Solomon Kane and Cull and so many others are going to benefit from it as well.
Well, and the thing that's really interesting with Conan is that he's a character that's interesting enough, very easy to cross over with other characters. Like Red Sonja makes, like in my mind, makes a lot of sense. But I feel like he could work with other characters. I mean, hell, even Marvel, we saw him pairing up with like the Punisher and Deadpool.
Yeah. So one of the things that Marvel decided when they brought him back in is they wanted to, put the character on the biggest kind of platform possible. So bringing him forward to the modern age and having him run around as part of a book called Savage Avengers, written by Jerry Dugan, was an idea that was like, look, Conan's now back in the Marvel universe. And if you've never read him before, now he's teaming up with Wolverine or Venom or Punisher. See, this character can stand shoulder to shoulder and toe to toe with any of these characters, and hopefully bring in, some new readers that way. And again, you've got the hardcore fan base, I think, turned up their nose at a lot of it. And the way I always felt was, as long as you've got the regular monthly title, and that's in what we call the Hyborian Age, the kind of barbaric era of Conan, and he's running around doing pure sword and sorcery, then everything else is icing on the cake. Then you can do other stuff with the character, and you can push and pull, try different styles, try different, art, try different approaches, as long as, you're doing it with an eye for entertainment and engagement, and trying to be, like any of these characters. I think any icon, whether that's Superman or Batman or Wonder Woman, they're bigger than us. You can crush them and rebuild them and do all sorts of amazing things, and they will bounce back because of that.
Well,
the power that's inherent in what they are.
Yeah. Well, the reason I ask is because feel like we've seen a rise in the multiverse and
Sure.
characters crawling in and whatnot, and I know it's something that we've seen. Funny enough, I feel like I saw it a lot in Fantastic Four, Flash, and we've seen it. Is there ever a chance Conan is going to meet some of the multi-dimensional Conans? Like a
I don't
council
know
of
about
barbarians.
I
Like
don't
just
know about that. I don't want to do quite Crisis on Infinite Conans or something like that. But what I think is possible, and what we've kind of been doing we did a miniseries last year called Battle of the Blackstone, and
Mhm,
the concept behind it was essentially Howard, whether he did it with the grand plan in mind or he was just being expedient in terms of coming up
mhm,
with names and concepts, he would reuse little bits and pieces. He would reuse symbols. He would reuse the names
mhm.
of occult things. He was a pen pal of H.P. Lovecraft, and they would actually use concepts from each other's stories and names and occult things
Wow,
in
I
their
did not know
stories as
that.
a bit of a shared world. And so
Mm,
my idea was, okay, we're going to take some of those things. A character like Kieran and Conrad, who are these two kind of eldritch investigators in the 1920s and 1930s, running
mm,
around. It's like X-Files from the 1920s, and they're
right.
investigating the occult, and they're getting themselves in trouble. There is a Robert E. Howard written story called The Haunter of the Ring, and they end up investigating this mystery. And at the heart of that mystery is literally the serpent ring, and it says it's Thothamon's serpent ring, which is the
Wow.
villain from the Conan stories. So
Right.
Howard was already creating crossovers between his own pulp stories. Whether or not you even picked up on that as a reader, he was pollinating across multiple times. He would use so Kull the Conqueror is from an earlier era than Conan. So
Mhm,
Kull's era is this sort of grand fantasy with massive, beautiful, kind of glass and golden structures. And then it
mhm.
all crumbles in like an apocalypse. And those are the ruins that Conan is adventuring through. Those are the places the kind of old relics that he's discovering in what we call the Hyborian Age. So again, Howard's original stories have got that kind of sense of time and place and crossover built into them. And there are like a dozen examples that I can use from different stories in Howard's own work. And that's, you know, canon. That's the original stuff, unedited, unchanged. And so in many ways, he was very forward thinking. He was already thinking, I wouldn't say multiversal, but he was definitely thinking cross time. And he was thinking about kind of this mythic structure that he was putting into place. One of the most interesting characters is a super obscure one named James Allison that I've used a couple times. And James
I
Allison
wanted to
is
ask
kind
you
of,
about him.
yeah, he's a stand-in essentially for Robert E. Howard himself. The character is an author living in rural Texas, just like Howard was. The difference is that James Allison is injured in like a horse riding accident. And so he's bedridden or walking with a really, you know, brutal limp, depending on which story you're reading. And his mind, because he can't travel where he wants to go, he goes into these kind of fugue states and he imagines himself and his past lives, and he sort of projects himself across time and in some cases across dimensions. And there's sort of this interesting interplay, almost like he is Robert E. Howard imagining himself going through these different stories and being these characters and having these adventures. And so we took sort of the symbolism of that and we've made it a more literal kind of part, that James Allison is sort of this connective tissue in a bunch of the big mythic stories that we're trying to tell, using as many of the Howard characters as possible, playing in as many kind of pulp milieus as we can to kind of surprise and hopefully, you know, bring old readers in and excite them with the possibilities, and bring new readers in and show them that this pulp stuff is as cool and as vibrant as anything else on the stands.
Now, did you happen to base him, otherwise it's ridiculously coincidental, off of the author James Allison who wrote the Blackstone novels?
Oh, well, that, so not off of, I mean, you know, there's a wink and a nod kind of there as well, like but James Allison is the name of the character, like that's Robert E. Howard's name for the character. I'm not making that character up. He is in 3 different stories that Howard wrote, you know, in the 20s and 30s.
Okay, so there just happens to be an author named James Allison who wrote
Yeah,
Blackstone novels
which
that,
is fascinating.
and he's in the Blackstone books.
Right. Well, there is a
That's
Robert E. Howard
crazy.
story called The Blackstone, which is a one-off horror story. And it's very much in the Cthulhu mythos. Like, it's about this strange obelisk in the middle of Eastern Europe and these people, this cult in this mad kind of ritual. And this guy ends up seeing the ritual from afar and it kind of driving him mad and all this sort of stuff. So I don't know if the Jim, you know, Allison who wrote the Blackstone books is, if that's a pen name or that it's like a nod to Howard, or I have no idea. I would have to do more research on that.
That would be cool. That would be so
That
cool.
would be a fun little callback for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we
So
have
before
a
we get to
Lovecraftian.
D&D, because I know you guys want to, I can see you
Yeah.
two above there bursting. I do want to ask about Samurai Jack, just
Of course. Yeah.
briefly.
So I had the ability to do, it was a really kind of big step forward for my career at that point. And it weirdly enough, that was a bake-off as well. So IDW they got the rights to Samurai Jack, and I was one of the writers they asked to pitch on it. And thankfully, again, I was able to kind of win out on that project. I ended up doing 20 issues. Most of those were drawn by a guy named Andy Siriano, who actually was one of the lead character designers for the original cartoon. So getting to work with him on that series, that's Andy's art here in the first, 5 issues in particular. He is just a phenomenal collaborator and an amazing artist. And we got to make this epic run, sort of continuing the series. This was before they did the 5th season of the show, and we did not know if that was ever going to happen. So we got to sort of posit this kind of season 4.5, where we were able to keep the momentum going and try and keep the spirit of the show alive as much as we could. And the fans really came out in force. It was originally just supposed to be a miniseries, and by the time we got to issue 3, they asked us to make it an ongoing, and we did 20 issues and had an absolute blast. It was just like such a vibrant and creative part of my career. Andy and the other artists I got to work with were an absolute delight. I got to really kind of get the trust of Cartoon Network. And at first, I think they were really worried about, making sure that this thing felt as legit as possible. And by the time we got that first storyline done, they were much more open to some of our wildest and weirdest ideas. And I think that made the comic feel like the show, and it made it feel like the kind of creative space that we were going to get to kind of go wild in, because it was such an amazing and creative cartoon, and we wanted to honor that by being just as kind of out there as the original cartoon was.
Absolutely. No, just reading it, like even just reading the comic, I had like the theme song going off in my head.
Yeah.
So every
Yeah.
once in a while, I was just like, "Watcha!"
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing
Yeah.
is, yeah, and the look is so critical to that. If you don't have that art style, I don't think it would have been as potent. I don't think it would have been as vibrant. One of the things that was really heartwarming was Phil Lamar, who's the voice of Jack. He was a
Yes,
really
he
early
is.
supporter of the comic. Like,
Oh my God, yes.
he was tweeting about
He
it.
is.
He came over to my table multiple times at conventions.
What?
We
He
ended
is
up
such a
doing,
good person.
he's
Wonderful.
phenomenal, and he's a huge comic
He
book
is.
fan. And he was just so, he was always, people would bring some of the issues up for him to sign, and he always would. If we were both at a convention, he would usually drop by or drop me a line, or I would come and bug him at his signing table. The ultimate version of that was when issue 20 came out, our final issue. And again, we didn't know there was going to be a season 5. So issue 20 is this now kind of alternate take on what if the show wraps up. We didn't know what
Right.
the situation would be. So I kind of posited, here's how you could kind of end it. And he enjoyed it so much, and Andy was so happy with it, that Phil reached out to me directly, and we ended up doing a panel at Awesome Con in Washington, D.C.,
What?
where we had the comic up on the screen, and then he read it in the voice of Jack, and he did all the narration.
That's
And
What?
crazy.
we had a packed panel. It was absolutely bonkers. And this crowd watching us literally read a comic book to a crowd, and the crowd is like screaming and yelling and cheering and clapping. And I'm getting goosebumps the whole time. It was one of the most enjoyable convention experiences of my life.
No, absolutely. And
That
like I remember when I was like, I think I was in high school, and Samurai
same.
Jack dropped, and it just
Yep.
blew my mind. And I just remember I was like, oh my God, this is like the coolest fucking thing in the world.
Yes.
And
Well, this
you know,
is what's so, I feel so fortunate, right? I had a really strong I was in, so like 3 weeks ago, I was in India. I went to Mumbai Comic Con, and it was crazy. It was an adventure. I got to go to a country I've never been to before. Went to this wild convention. It was an amazing experience. And the depth
right,
and breadth of the fandom there, they don't get a lot of guests. And so the people who were showing this outpouring for my work, but also the broader, just the things that they love, right? So whether that's Marvel
right,
superhero stuff, or Conan the Barbarian, or Dungeons and Dragons, or Samurai Jack, or Rick and Morty, like they were out in force, and they were just so excited to meet anyone even tangentially associated with these properties.
right.
And you felt this just euphoric excitement around this stuff, and it was such a cool experience. And the number of Jack fans really took me aback, because it's been quite a few years since the series wrapped up, the comic.
Right.
And the show's been wrapped up for a long time now, but it, like yourself, I think it really struck a chord with people.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, that feeling that we wanted to try and evoke, in the comics, that every issue was going to give you that feeling of momentum and the artistry and the intensity, that the stories had to have that kind of snappy action. One of the things it taught me also was to cut back on the amount of dialogue I was doing, because the show is so visual and so
Right.
vibrant, and you're working with a phenomenal artist like Andy, who can do it all on the page, that my ability to describe an action scene, or just leave it to him to
Absolutely.
play that out. I look at those covers and those pages, like it's just
Gorgeous.
such a rush to be able
And
to every
and
month they would
and
come in, and I couldn't believe my name was on it.
right. And I just need to say this because as a fan, the whole thing is phenomenal. I mean, like I said,
Thank
I
you.
own the whole thing, and you were gracious enough a long time ago. As Mako would say, long ago.
Oh.
You know,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
oh no, the thing is, I as a kid, I watched so many cartoons. I started to be able to do voices, and I remember I did Samurai Jack. I think because I met Phil at least twice.
Yeah.
And I told him one of my favorite moments in the show. I mean, the whole thing is phenomenal. One of my favorites was
Sure.
when Jack learns how to jump higher,
Yep.
and
Jump high.
he has
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
with Aku at the end, and it's just like, you can fly. It's like, no, jump good, and it
Yep.
just
Jump good.
whoosh,
Yep.
I'm
Yep.
like done.
So good.
Um,
It's
and
yeah.
no, but I need to say this. The whole thing
Sure.
is amazing. The Scotsman story is one of my favorites because
Thank you.
because and I've said this forever. I was like, I've said this to friends like,
Yeah.
oh, when I was like, Samurai Jacqueline and the Scotswoman just lay
So
waste to
it
comic
was
book
one of those
exploitation.
ideas. It was
You
one of
know,
those ideas that we threw into the pot. And I think originally Cartoon Network bristled because they were
hilarious.
worried about it as a concept. And I was like, it's totally in line with something they do in the show. And again, I think we built up trust to a point where they were like, okay, but we got to make this clear. This is just the one storyline. This is just the one thing. And
right,
trying to get those, to again, I think to surprise and to delight the fans that when you watch an episode of the show, you never knew what was going to happen. And I knew that we didn't just want it to be about calling back to old characters, that was part of our formula, but it couldn't be the only thing, that it was just going to be retreads. And so if we did bring back a character like the Scotsman, how can we put a curveball on it? How can we make it something that you haven't quite ever seen before? And Andy and I jamming like dumb ideas back and forth over email or getting on a Skype call and just laughing
right,
and brainstorming stupid stuff. The weird cast of gladiators in the very first issue, and there's one
mhm,
character called Headclaw who's clearly just Wolverine with claws popping out of the top of his head,
yeah,
and he just screams like bub over and over again. And that was
so
just
good,
like, that's the kind of weird crap that they would do on the show. Like they would always have
right,
I'm the
characters that were thinly
This is
veiled
true.
allusions
Yeah,
to
they
other
had, I
stuff,
think at one point, a frog that just said the same thing over and over again. I'm like, all
Yeah.
right,
There's
sure.
a character who's essentially a combination of this anime character called Lupin the Third and his partner
hmm
Jingen, and he just combined them both into
Third.
one character, and it's really fun. Like that's the thing.
Lupin the
It's
Third.
like when you have an iconic character like Jack, and you have this weird pseudo, like it's a post-apocalyptic kind of wasteland of sci-fi weirdness. You can kind of do anything, and that
right,
creative environment just made it so fun that we could throw Jack into everything, and Jack will always be himself, but what you want to
right,
see him push up against is the weirdest opponents possible, and the weirdest situations and environments.
absolutely.
I
I mean,
like it. I like embracing the weird. I love the world of Samurai
Oh
Jack.
yeah,
I like the people. I like the dialogue, and even the lack of dialogue. Nothing is wasted.
that's the
right,
And
thing. It's about making those smart
I,
choices when to use and when not to use,
yeah,
and to have other
because
characters be very chatty, and then
yeah,
Jack
because he's
himself
not a
is very
very
stoic.
Jack himself is not an actual chatty person. He says what he
Right.
needs to say, and that's it. He doesn't waste words.
Yeah.
But sometimes to see his reaction to other things who are chatty, so now he actually has to explain himself.
Yeah, and that was the fun thing too, is coming up with
It's
these
always
characters
great.
to play off of him and to sort of riff on him in as many ways as possible. And then, like I said, to have a collaborator like Andy on there and the rest of our team, who were kind of up for anything and up for, like, there's a term in animation that we use called plussing, that, when you come up with an initial idea, that's cool. But then in the storyboard or the design phase, we're going to plus it. We're going to add to it. We're going to keep building on top of it. And
mhm,
it felt like that with the comic, like we were all trying to outdo each other. Like I'm describing a weird moment, and then Andy's like, oh yeah. And then our colorist
Oh
is like,
yeah,
oh
we'll make
yeah.
it weirder.
Exactly. And that was the thing. When you're in that kind of a creative team where you feel like, first of all, you're
It's
so
gonna
proud
get
of the
real
work,
weird here,
you're
guys.
so pumped, and you want to put your best on every damn page and enjoy that process. And then when it finally comes out, to have the readers respond to it and be just as excited and be just as vibrant off of it. You said you brought every issue to me to sign, and it
yeah,
sounds weird, but that, when someone brings me Samurai Jack, it's rare that they just bring me one issue. It's usually the whole set. Like that's kind of a thing. Like,
yeah,
because they have them all, because they collected them all, because it means so
oh
much
yeah,
to them. And that alone,
absolutely,
I think, is a really cool kind of a sign that we kind of struck something very precious in terms of
Uh,
that series. And it was a huge transformation for my career as well. It really put me on the radar for a lot of publishers and editors, I think, as well.
and and speaking of passion projects, because like I
Mhm.
said, I definitely have to bring this up because I remember this. Apparently, people have forgotten, so I have no problem bringing it up to you. The cow and chicken one shot from Super Secret. I mean, talk about a weird idea. So, for those who don't know, Super Secret's Crisis War was every Cartoon Network kid's dream. So, it was
Yep,
all of your favorite villains:
yep.
Mandark, Mojo Jojo, Vigilax from Ben 10, Aku,
Was
all of these
him
villains
in it?
teaming up, and thus their respective heroes have to also join forces. So you have Powerpuff Girls, Samurai Jack, Dexter, Ben 10. For some reason, Ed, Ed, and Eddie. Don't
Like the
ask me
Legion,
who they were.
Cartoon Network's Legion of Doom.
Well,
You know,
that was the
It-
thing, is that essentially, because we had such momentum with the Powerpuff Girls series that I know
it was
Troy
good. I love
was
that.
doing, and then you've also got the Samurai Jack book we were doing. It kind of led to this little mini kind of Cartoon Network renaissance at IDW, and it was super fun to be a part of it. When they said that, Louise Simonson, like Wheezy, one of the best, most amazing editors
oh
and
yeah.
writers in the whole business, is basically putting this whole amazing tapestry together, and would I like to be a part of it? I said, of course, it'd be, a blast. And they said, you come up with some really fun, cartoony, crazy stuff in the Jack book. We're going to give you a challenge. We want you to do, cow and chicken. And I was just like, oh my God, okay. Rewatch some of my favorite episodes and just go, all right, get into that headspace and
Oh
let's
my god,
really.
yeah. No,
And then
but
we had an artist named, hold on, Jorge Malogo, I think his name was Malogo, and he was so great. And he got into that headspace. He really understood how weird and strange and over the top those expressions were, and how crazy the book could be. And none of it works if the art doesn't work. That's the key, right? Like, I've done comedy books like my own, Skull Kickers and Image, and then obviously the Jack book and other things. And a joke doesn't play if the art's not clear, and it doesn't,
yeah,
lift up the joke. And you've got good collaborators like that, it makes it seem effortless.
I, yeah. Well, I just want to say one again, reading it, remembering cow and chicken, and just I was like, good lord, what a throwback. I
I
Cow
have
think
and
you are
been.
the
chicken.
only interviewer who has ever asked me about the cow and chicken book. So
You're welcome.
I
Drew's,
doff my
Drew's
And
cap.
I
good
need to
at
say
that.
this because I have been laughing because I'm not a fan of this franchise at all. I've been laughing about Starbutts for years.
Oh my gosh.
So, you know,
Thank you.
which is
Yes.
just everybody, it's exactly what it feels like. It's the red
Yep.
guy doing coffee.
Yep.
Yep.
Starbucks. Deal with
Yep.
it.
Yep.
Um, that has been making me chuckle
The
like
red
an
guy.
idiot in the back of my mind for years.
Amazing.
Um, because he was
Honestly,
always
the
the
fact that
dumbest, weirdest
you can
character in my mind. Because I'm like, I feel like you're a joke I don't get, but I'm still giggling. And as an adult, I'm like, oh, I got it now.
Nice.
You son of a bitch.
Well, and so
Um,
here's the thing. I think sometimes some comic book writers can kind of subsume the material. Like, you get their voice no matter what. And I've always
mhm,
looked at, here's your transition. Are you ready? I've always looked at writing like role-playing games where I'm trying
mhm,
to get into the character, or I'm trying to be either the dungeon master or the player or some combination therein. And I want to get that
uh-huh,
voice right. Like when I'm writing superheroes, it's like, whatever, Steve, what would Steve Rogers do? What would Clint Barton
right.
do? What would Wanda Maximoff do, or whatever? Or if I'm
Mhm,
doing, any Samurai Jack, or if I'm doing whatever, Cow and Chicken or Rick and Morty, it's not about me. It's not about Jim's voice. It's about, what is Rick Sanchez thinking in this insane moment, and how's he going to go off? And so
sure.
whenever I write a script with an established character, particularly, like the animated stuff, I will literally go back and I read all the dialogue out loud. I'm like here in my office by myself, saying it out loud, because you want to have the cadence. You want it to
Right.
feel like what it should sound like. That Aku sounds like Aku, and Jack sounds like Jack, and Rick and Morty and all those characters sound the way that you would want them to sound. And not because
Mhm,
I'm pulling the string and copying a line from the show, but because
mhm,
I'm trying to get into the headspace of how they sound and
mhm.
how they feel.
Does this mean you're a
How
really great impressionist? Because as you're saying this, I'm just imagining like you're just doing a Rick voice, like just all right, Morty,
Oh yeah.
we're gonna do the thing. Oh, geez, Rick. Oh
Oh,
no.
geez. Yeah, you're doing the Morty. Yeah, you're doing it. Like I mean, I don't think that I'm like a phenomenal. Like I would never be able to do, you
Oh
know,
my gosh.
a good impression, but you're still doing it in that broader sense. Like if I'm writing Harley Quinn,
Mhm.
I'm still doing the Mr. J's and all those kinds of things
Oh boy.
because you got to think about that kind of voice, and same
Right,
thing
right.
Yeah.
with whatever Batman or anyone else.
Especially.
And so it's a tonal quality, but it's also a cadence kind of a thing where it's like
Okay.
you would never go, oh, Jim is a chameleon, he can do any voice,
Uh-huh.
but that it reads well because it's coming out of my mouth in that broader sense of pacing
Mhm.
and grammar or whatever
All right.
you want to call it.
All
Yeah.
right. Then that, ladies, I'm done. I'm going to the questions. D&D away.
On to Dungeons and
Before
Dragons.
D&D, I have
Yeah,
I have one question for you because you got into the
sure.
weirdness of the different uh cartoons and stuff. Okay, so I have an Adult Swim and a manga. These are my weirdness niches of just like
Okay.
nobody has ever watched these besides me. 12-ounce mouse,
Oh, I have not watched that. I'm sorry.
Adult Swim. Okay, and Cromartie High for a manga,
Cromartie
or not a
High.
manga,
I don't
an
know that one
anime.
either. Okay. All
Okay,
right. I will
these are
check them out.
definitely. I will send you a link because to
Sure.
both of them, they're amazing. So, but anyway,
Awesome.
on to D&D because we're like,
Sweet.
Go.
yeah. So as you say, you're the bard for
I
the
was
barbarian.
gonna
Do you play
say
a bard?
that
Oh,
before
sorry.
Oh, you're asking if I play a bard? I generally don't. My
Oh wait,
favorite character class is probably rogues. Yeah. I do love the sneaky. I do love the fast talkers, the troublemakers, characters in way, way over their heads. I love that kind of stuff. I have played bards. I played a little bit of everything. I'm usually the dungeon master with my crew or with my friends, to the point where I actually, although I've done streaming games and charity games for official D&D, I also had the chance last year to do. There's this cool company and program they do called D&D in a Castle. And so
yeah.
I literally was up in Newcastle running a game for 6 players, a campaign over 3 days. We played 24 hours worth of game in 3 days, 8 hours a day in this castle, and just the kind of escapist gaming that I haven't had probably since college, and getting paid for it and getting to travel to the other side of the world to play D&D. It was just absolutely mind-bending and amazing. And I'm going back this November, and there are still some seats available, unbelievably.
Very
So
nice.
yeah, I'm doing 2 groups this time. So I'm going to be running it in mid
Cool.
to late November. And then I'll be hopping over to Thought Bubble, the big the comic festival there. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
I cut MJ off before I let into things. What were you gonna say, hun?
Oh no, he was talking about voices and how the characters would be, and I feel like that's more difficult with a character that's so established and so iconic
For sure.
because it's like here's this very well established character, fandom of so many. Don't fuck it up. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like
totally.
that's like
Yeah, there's
for
a
me. I'm
there's
like,
a weird feeling and a good
that's a lot of
feeling. Like
pressure.
when your
The
goal has
pressure.
got to be to sort of find that voice as true as you can, and no one's ever going
Yeah.
to do it perfect, and the fandoms
No.
can be really intense, but the way I always look at it is I would rather they're reading and paying attention even if they're occasionally criticizing than not caring at all. And so, for the most part, I've had a pretty good relationship with most of the fandom. Like
Very cool. I love
everything
that.
I've done, like Wolverine stories, or
Mm.
I did Iron Man for a little while, or obviously multiple things with the Avengers and the Champions. And it's like I'm trying to meet the fans sort of where they are and let them know that, you know, I can never claim that I'll be perfect at it, but that there is, heart and thought and care and research being put into it to the best of my ability. And so if you come to it honestly and you try and be as open and honest about it, I, most of the time, the fandom's going to meet you there and be pretty darn cool about it. And the nice thing is
Yeah, I
when you
feel
do
like
it well, they'll also champion that stuff forward. And I'm definitely seeing that in the case of things like Samurai Jack or Conan, where the old school fans, they were pretty bitter, and they were pretty, ready to kind of hate anything new. And
Oh,
we've
absolutely.
been able to
Oh,
kind of
absolutely.
bring them back around in a way that hopefully, we will sustain as we go forward.
And that was really cool to see. Like, oh yeah, this is obviously not the OG person, but the spirit was there. You can still say, yeah, this was something Jack would do. This is 100% Conan would do. 100%.
Yeah.
I could totally, So it was so good to see, like, he's again established characters, and I enjoyed everything I've read, even the goofiness of the
Thank you.
D&D book. What would Rick Sanchez do? Well, he would be absolutely
Yeah.
fucking unhinged like Rick
Well,
Sanchez
this is what's fun too, getting to do both the mainline Dungeons and Dragons book, which is more of your colorful, magical fantasy adventure, and then something like the Rick and Morty D&D, where you're simultaneously doing a D&D story, but you're filtering it through the crazy Rick and Morty kind of isms and trying to.
It was interesting, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It was so much fun.
Thank you. A huge part of that was, on the first miniseries, I got to collaborate with Pat Rothfuss, who's a very famous fantasy author, and we both came at it from a position of kind of love of D&D and a love of Rick and Morty, and how can we merge these things together in a way that felt. It sounds weird to say respectful, because the whole point of the property is to like blow things up and cause shit and make a mess, and so part of being respectful means kind of going wild with it, and there were some things in there where we're like, we have to poke terrible fun at D&D, and getting notes back from Wizards of the Coast, the guys who own Dungeons and Dragons, where they were loving the more cruel and the more nasty and the more sarcastic we were about their game. And I'm like, I'm getting paid to make fun of the thing from the people that are make it. Like, it was mind-bending but fun, because that shows to me like you've got the right people in charge if they're able to poke fun at themselves and not take it too seriously, and realize that the best thing we can do is drop a big elbow on it and make it as fun as possible, and that we can kind of, your best friends can hurt you the most, you know what I mean? They know where to poke you with the elbow really hard. And we love D&D, so we can just drive that elbow deep and really knock the wind out of you, because man, I've been playing for 30, 40 years now, and so I've seen it all, I've done it all, and we've got 100 ridiculous cliches that we can kind of build on, and not just do like sort of on multiple levels. We can tell a story that works for just your average reader, but then if you know D&D and you know the lore and you know some of the iconic artwork, you see where we are doing deep homages or little kind of cuts that whenever a reader would come over and tell me that they caught something bizarre that we threw in there, some ridiculously obscure things, and when someone picks up on it, you're like, you're one of my people, one of us kind of stuff. That was the best feeling, for sure.
Quick question for you. Sort of like mixing the two, Conan and D. So with reading it, the narration, the book overall is just amazing, but the narration.
You talking about Conan? You're talking about specifically?
Conan.
Sure.
So it reads, like a dungeon master would be telling it, the narration through it. Did you pull from any dungeon master skills from playing the games to
I mean, absolutely. Whether it's the D&D book, they've all got different voices. Some people say to me, they go, particularly when I'm writing Dungeons and Dragons and Conan at the same time, and you're like, don't you get sick of sword and sorcery? And you're like, I don't know, do you get sick of superheroes? Do you get sick of any other genre? No, fuck no, I love this stuff. It's deep in my blood. Cut me, D20s come flying out. Like, this stuff is near and dear to my heart. But although Conan influenced the design of D&D and kind of some of the aspects of it, it is its own kind of thing. It's a very particular slice of sword and sorcery and pulp. And the mainline kind of D&D comic is a much more magical and kind of adventurous, almost a caper, that when I'm writing the D&D regular series that I was doing, multiple miniseries with the Baldur's Gate heroes, you have you're trying to get across the feeling of chaos that happens at the table, that anything can turn on a die roll, that a bad decision can suddenly swerve the entire narrative off in a crazy path. And then when we were doing the Rick and Morty stuff, it was even more kind of heightened ludicrousness that you're able to sort of say, okay, not only are we trying to riff on D&D, but now it's Rick's assumptions about power gaming and being an asshole dungeon master, and Morty's naivety about, can he pick up chicks with this stuff, and where are we going, and how do we, like, so you're trying to use those character personalities and then framing it through D&D, and then doing fun reversals. Like, for example, taking a character like Jerry, who's normally incompetent in everything, and just flipping that switch and making him shockingly good at D&D because he's so go along to get along that inadvertently he's a really good team player, and that he can actually step up and he knows the rules. And that's the kind of fun swerve that you would have in the cartoon, that they would suddenly take the character who sucks the most and give them the skill to pull something off. And Rick, who thinks he knows everything about everything, is actually terrible at the game because he's a power gamer and a selfish asshole. And that's not what good gaming is about, being manhandling the table and thinking you're the all-powerful dungeon master god is bad gaming, and it's bad D&D, and it's bad friendship, and it's bad cooperative play. And so it all kind of swam together naturally in terms of the thematic and the characters that they're elevating each other. And I think some of the reviews I got when we first announced the miniseries, a lot of people were like, oh, these crossovers, these cash grabs, these just, surface level crap, take two things and slap them together. And then the book came out and we got these almost begrudging compliments. Like, this is way better than it has any right to be. And you're like, good. That's the best compliment I can ask for, that we actually got you on side and we told you a story worth telling, instead of just saying, insert A crossover with B property and, money spits out the other side of it or something.
Nice.
So you mentioned, Leo, did you have anything else? I'm sorry.
I do, but I know you want to get some D&D questions in. No,
Well,
no, not
sure.
D&D.
Yeah, but you haven't spoken at all. Oh,
It's-
okay.
That's true.
Yeah, I'll get my
Okay.
questions in after your D&D stuff.
Okay. So before the show, we were talking, you have the entire first edition collected. And
Yeah,
you've been
I
playing
have a
Joseph.
deep collection of D&D. Yeah, I've been collecting. I started playing in the early 80s, like the same era as the Stranger Things kids, which is why Jody Hauser and I wrote the Stranger Things versus D&D graphic novel, which was essentially the stories that happened before the start of the first show in the first season, how the kids get their first D&D set and how they start playing together. And that was pretty much the same era that my older brother and I were playing in, and my older cousins. And so for me, that was just like a huge nostalgia bomb. When I saw that first episode of Stranger Things, it was just like, oh my God, the time machine is so intense, because you remember exactly what that felt like. And the literal, basement boys throwing dice and being goofballs and figuring out who we were in this kind of cool environment where we could sort of cut loose and play the game. And so I already had a really deep kind of D&D collection that I had built up over the years. And then during lockdown, I had a kind of I don't know, whichever you want to call it, retail therapy kind of blitz, where I bought a whole bunch of old stuff on eBay and just sat around kind of. And then once I was getting close, I realized, I can make a checklist, and now I only need a handful of modules and I'll have every single one from first edition. And lo and behold, there it was. The next thing I knew, we were giving a Tim Hortons card to my mailman because they were delivering so many packages to our place, and I finished my D&D set. So yeah, but I've got D&D books across all editions.
So good.
And then I've started working on D&D stuff officially in 2014 as 5th edition was coming out. And so I've been working on D&D stuff for just over 10 years now. The comic series, eventually the license manager at Wizards of the Coast, who was in charge of narrative, he was getting all my comic scripts to approve. And he called me up after the first few were handed in, and he's like, oh, you're one of us. Oh, you're like deep and love this stuff as much as we do.
Yeah.
Deep, you are into this stuff. And so I started doing consulting for Wizards of the Coast on a bunch of different things. One of the books called Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus, which is one of the campaign books. I'm the kind of creative consultant. So I went into the office for a week and we brainstormed a bunch of insane material. And what was crazy was that was the exact same point in time that Larian signed the license to work on what would eventually be Baldur's Gate 3. And they basically said, what is your latest stuff? And so they sent them our brainstorming and all of our kind of design notes. And so there's a bunch of crazy crap that we came up with that's in Baldur's Gate 3 that we were
Oh,
jamming.
that game
So
is so
yeah, it was so fun. So for example, one of the things that came up in our discussions at the Wizards office, we had a whiteboard and we were just brainstorming stuff, and we were talking about, the economics of hell, which sounds crazy, but that's the kind of thing you can do in a fantasy
It's
world. And we said,
important.
okay, so hell is run on souls. And I said, okay, so how do you trade souls? Like, is it a ball of light? Is it is it a puff of smoke? Is it a contract like the Little Mermaid signs her soul away? Like, how does that look or feel? And eventually we were jamming back and forth. And I said, it's got to be currency. That means coins. It should be infernal coins. You pound that soul into infernal metal. And we came up with the concept of soul coins. And lo and behold, soul coins are like a major thing in Baldur's Gate. And that was something I came up with while we were just sitting around brainstorming around a table. So the first time I start playing that game and I wander into a room and I hear these weird whispering voices, and I was like, there is no way. There is no way. And I go over to the table and there's a soul coin on the table, and I pick that thing up and I go, well, damn, that's a fun little nugget, that you're able to come up with something that, sticks around in the D&D canon. And every so often you indulge yourself. So for example, there's a character in the D&D comics. Well, that's where he started. His name is Krydel, and he's a rogue because I love rogues. And he's
Yeah, me
my
too.
rogue. He's my rogue from high school. And now he's a canon D&D character, and he's a
Oh,
magic
so cool.
card, and he's in
Shut
multiple books.
up.
And if
Really?
you pick up the 5.5 player's handbook, he's one of the examples of a rogue in the rogue section of the player's handbook. So it doesn't get much better than that in terms of being able to make a tiny little a stamp on the D&D kind of multiverse.
Do, do you have any really weird house rules that you've come up with for like specific things? I'm going to throw out an example
Sure.
because so you know how in depth I'm talking about. This was something I had an ongoing game for like 3 years with the people that I lived with. So we played
Awesome.
like every night almost.
Yeah,
And
that's like
after a
residence.
number of
That's like when I was
incidents,
in college. Yeah.
Same.
Sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
after a
Same.
number of incidents with with some of my characters and gnomes, it was totally not my fault at all. This is all on
Mm-hmm.
the GM. Yeah, well, we rotated that, but it was when he was doing it. For some reason, whenever he was running things and any of my characters interacted with gnomes, like within about 5 minutes of the interaction, they would blow up everything within like a 50-foot radius of them. And if that was
Nice.
like their shop and they had scrolls and things, it would get wet. It did help once when there was like but he made it a house rule then that whenever I came within like a certain distance of gnomes, like they would blow up everything around them. And
Nice.
so it was just very strange. So did you ever do anything really weird like that? Like, do
Yeah,
you
we
have
had a
a
bunch of
ongoing?
you always have in jokes that kind of crop up, and then they sort of exactly the kind of thing you're describing there, where they feed into a fun little thing. And some of that stuff only makes sense to those players in that moment, and so it's hard to explain to other people. But there's other stuff that's sort of propagated forward. So for example, I got sick of naming taverns. You go into a new town and then you're like, oh, we're going to go to the inn, we're going to go to the tavern, what's it called? And you're like, it's the, I don't know, the goat and the granny, or it's the this, or it's that, or it's, and you're trying to come up with 100 different names for stupid. And so eventually I would just say it's the gizzard, because that was what we would always, and then so it became almost like the McDonald's of fantasy taverns, where they would walk into a town and they would go, all right, so we're going to head over to the gizzard. And I said, great, so this gizzard is a particularly large one, and it's got this kind of whatever, and they have this on the menu. And so we could just skip me trying to brainstorm
Oh,
some name of
that's so good.
something.
I
And
love that.
it became a plot point in a comic that I did. So Skull Kickers was my first kind of, wasn't my first series, but it was my breakout kind of creator owned series. And spoilers for like a 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 15-year-old comic, um, they end up going to a tavern called the Gizzard. And when they go to another city, there's a tavern called the Gizzard, and they go to another city and there's a tavern called the Gizzard. And what you find out late in the story is that all the gizzards are connected together. They're actually just one dimensional portal, and you're walking into the exact same tavern every time with the exact same people. And it's a
Wow.
huge plot point that
Nice.
becomes part of the sort of ludicrous climax that we build to eventually in the book.
Holy crap.
And so this fun little in joke that was just like Jim doesn't know how to come up with the name of a tavern becomes the creative fuel for something that worked its way into my comics, to the point now where other dungeon masters have told me that when they have their, party go into a town, they just tell them they go to the Gizzard, and you're sort of like, well, may the legacy live ever onward.
We didn't have the Gizzard, but every bartender was Sam and every barmaid
Sure.
was Lisa, no matter how many
Exactly,
of them
just
there were
easier.
working at the same
Yep.
time.
Yep.
And so you'd have to be like, hey, Lisa, I didn't introduce myself. Lisa, get me a beer.
Exactly. Well, the tropes and the icons, after a certain point, you're just like, okay, you are here for a purpose, and your purpose is to be background setting material, and then let's get to the fun stuff. Absolutely.
The innkeeper's house was the same person. It looked like the same person, but like they're dressed up as somebody else.
Yeah, totally. It's like they've got a mustache this time. Yeah.
Listen, if Pokemon can get away with like a billion Officer Jenny and Nurse
Yep.
Joys, anything is possible. Okay.
Absolutely.
Just need to point. And then there was oh yeah, that's my sister. I'm like, my God, who was your dad? Like
Right?
a franchise? Good
so
Lord.
It got to the point where we're like, okay, who's going to say something? Someone's got to say something. Nobody said anything.
Someone was always waiting for someone else to do it. And eventually was like, nope, we're going to the next town. We'll figure it out later.
That's literally how every bloody time, literally. Who's going to say something? Okay, if this barkeep is just the same person in a red wig, I swear to God. And it literally was some absurd thing. I'm like, okay, someone's got to say something, and no one ever did.
I love the commonalities of all these D&D games and kind of the shared experiences of it. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, Kari, you lost so many points. Like, if you have a barkeep named Sam and the waitress isn't Diane, like, you lost so many points right there.
God damn it, Leo. The Gizzard is not the Cheers of the D&D universe. Okay?
But what
we
if
didn't
it
go
was?
to the Gizzard.
Jack and Diane.
We didn't name it. We just called it the
kids
bar.
growing up in a fun place. Stop it.
Go to the tavern. Go to the tavern. Which tavern?
Yep.
The nice tavern or the shitty tavern? Shitty
That's
tavern.
Right. Yep.
My dad used to DM for us when we were kids.
Actually, the Cheers could be a D&D bar.
He was a big music person. He grew up with music, So
oh, this rabbit hole. No.
Yep. So it was all music, and all of his characters were then past, like Jack and Diane. I'm like, are you serious? Stop. After like, stop. It's like Son and Cher, Jack and Diane. It was like, stop. Come on, Dad.
Listen,
we actually have a D&D game that we do on my Owlite Adventures, or it's called Owlite, the Owlite Network, Owlite Adventures. We had to take a huge break from things because people were moving and all this stuff. Just it's every time we're gonna do this, I gotta go to a business meeting. Okay, it's like every D&D thing, only most people could.
Well, that is one of the most difficult things. Once you're an adult, just trying to find the time for a consistent campaign can be tough. People are like, man, I would love to be at your regular table. I'm like, do I have a regular table? I wish I did. Like, that's one of the most difficult things. What was interesting was something like the lockdowns, where we ended up doing a weekly Zoom games with a bunch of other comic book creators. So we didn't record them. We weren't streaming them. This was just for fun. This was just us.
Oh man,
so
that's amazing.
It was like Jody Hauser and Jackson Lansing and Colin Kelly, Zach Davison, Lucas Kettner and Kara O'Neill, and just Phil Sevy, and all these amazing people who I had known at conventions, but we would always feel like ships passing in the night. And all of a sudden we had this weekly game where we would jump on together and we would hang out and we would laugh. And some people would drop in. We would do these like 3 or 4 part kind of little adventures, and then we would someone else would take a turn as the game master, and we would try a different system, or we try a different adventure, and it kept us kind of sane, during everything, during the weirdest times of our lives.
Nice.
That's awesome.
So what's your favorite edition?
So it's weird, right? Like I think 5th edition does a pretty good job at taking the past and taking modern kind of game design elements and bridging them with some of the original bits of the past. For a long time, I really liked 3rd because it was at a really formative period of my life, but I've gone back. So last year was the 50th anniversary of D&D. And as part of that, I went to a few gaming conventions that I hadn't been to before. I went to GaryCon, which is put on by the Gygax family, one of the co-creators of D&D, and it was very much in an old school mode for that, because it's the 50th anniversary and a lot of the original artists and writers showed up. And so I wanted to run an AD&D, a first edition adventure. And so I kind of dug back into the original books and realized some of the charm of that original D&D, that despite all the kind of sharp, weird corners and strange bits, there's something very primal and joyous about it. And taking modern players who were used to 5th edition and kind of putting them through the gauntlet of 1st edition, which is much more deadly and much more dangerous and much more difficult, and them realizing that every decision mattered that much more, and that they could literally die in an instant if they made a wrong one, heightened the level of the table, particularly in what we call a tournament mode, where you're running this at a convention. This isn't your regular weekly gaming group, so we're only going to be playing for 2 or 3 hours max. So if you die in the first hour, that's just how it goes. You're off to another table or whatever, and you want to stick around. So there's this sense of like every role can have a real intense quality to it. And so I've kind of really been enjoying the charm of 1st edition again in a way that sort of surprised me. I don't know if it's my favorite. I definitely wax and wane kind of all over the place, but it's been fun to kind of get back to the root of the game and also bring other people into it, even if they think they know D&D, and kind of go, well, here's this old kind of artifact that I think still has some real luster to it.
Nice.
You mentioned con, so just wanted to bring up. So next week you're going to be in England at the is it MCM Comic Con?
Yeah, it's called MCM Comic Con London. So I did the show last year. I had an amazing time. Titan, the people who are publishing Conan, are in their bases in London, and so it's a perfect excuse for me to head over to jolly old England and meet a bunch of UK readers and get to hang out with my publisher for a few days. I'm also going to be signing at Forbidden Planet, the flagship store in downtown London, which will be really awesome.
Very nice.
And then I'm hopping over to Madrid in Spain. Quite a few artists that I'm currently working with, including the artists on Conan. So I've got Roberto de la Torre, I've got Fernando Dagnino, and Ivan Gill are 3 different artists I'm all working with, who all happen to be in Spain and live within an hour or 2 outside of Madrid. So I'm flying into Madrid. I'm hanging out with these guys for the first time in person. We're going to be signing at a bookstore in downtown Madrid, which is going to be awesome. And it's our first time going to Spain. So my wife and I are really excited to tour around the city and see the sights and take it all in. It's going to be really, really fun.
That's awesome. And speaking of overseas, you said before the show, Conan is now in 11 languages. So
yeah, which is mind-bending to me.
Awesome.
I've had books in a lot of different languages before, but it's rare that I would know literally when they come out. So like, the Rick and Morty book comes out in French or in Spanish or something like that. Or I did a Legends of the Dark Knight story, and when I was in Japan, I ended up finding a copy of it in Japanese, which was really cool. But they don't really tell you that stuff. Like, the stuff kind of comes out on weird random schedules, and some of it gets translated and some of it doesn't. But the Conan fans are so passionate, and they're so into it, and they're so vocal that, like, I know the week that the new issue drops in Brazil, I know when the book's coming out in French or in German, because the Conan fandom is on social media and they're tagging me on Instagram or in a live stream or in a post. They're like, I literally saw there's these amazing guys in Brazil. The Portuguese version is very popular. And these guys are like, literally, they have my book and they're like waving it in the air and they're screaming El Barbaro, El Barbaro. And you're just like, okay, we have struck a chord with this, fan base, and they're super into it. And that feels really, really special. The book has been around. Like I said, the character's older than Superman. And so going to a convention, and I've had not just once or twice, like 30, 40 of these people who are older than me, old enough to be my dad, and they've come over really heartfelt, and they've said, I've been collecting Conan since 1970, before I was born. And when I read your book, I feel like I'm 15 again. And the kind of hearty handshakes and the energy that comes off of those experiences, it feels really special. And it reminds you that you're part of this grander legacy. And it's a very rare and wonderful thing. And I certainly
Mhm.
never want to take that for granted. And I've had moments, I've written Wolverine stories and you're like, man, I love this character. And the first time you write whatever Snicked or something like that, or you're writing a Batman script and you say, okay, Batman jumps out of the Batmobile. And you're like, oh shit, Batman jumps out of the Batmobile because I told him to. Like, that's the craziest thing ever, But this sustained ability to tell this big, amazing mythic story that we're putting together for Conan, and to be able to chart out the path years into the future and I know what I'm going to be writing next fall, like I'm on Conan to 2027, maybe longer. And so I know end of 2026 what our big plot line is and what we're building up to and what we're foreshadowing and why it's important and where the symbolism and the passion is going to be when we get there. And to know that and have that grand kind of plan and be working with people who are just as passionate and just as stoked to do that is a very, very precious thing. And then to have the fan base respond to it, there are a few, greater pleasures that I've had in my career.
Okay.
Now, do you still get time to read comics?
Yeah, so I'm reading, like, obviously I'm doing a lot of research reading, so I'm digging back into older stuff, particularly Conan, obviously. But I do read quite a few other books. I try and keep up on as many superhero books as I can, but obviously I tend to do them in binges. So I'll, Ryan North, there's a lot of comic book talent here in Toronto. So like Ryan North, the writer of Fantastic Four, is an old friend of mine. And so I'll read, 6-8 months of FF kind of back to back, or like Jed McKay, he isn't in Toronto, but he's another Canadian and he's out on the East Coast. So like I'm getting caught up on X-Men or Avengers or things like that, Zdarsky on Batman or things like that, where you want to see what your friends are doing and you're super excited to hear about new people who are coming up. I kept hearing about, oh my God, this guy Dan Waters, you got to read his stuff. And now, he's doing that that new Batman book, Dark Pattern. Oh crap, is that what it is? And it's awesome. It's like really fun and mysterious and creepy. And it's like, okay, I want to meet this dude. I want to, chat with him. Or Ram V, like that was a guy I was loving his work. I loved those Savage Shores, and I think Rare Flavors is phenomenal. And then I got to meet him, a couple years ago and just be like, man, you're awesome. Like that's the kind of amazing thing where I get to meet someone who I've become a fan of their work, through reading, and artists, obviously, so many phenomenal artists in the business, getting to work with some of them, getting to just be a fan of their work and see them grow. And so I'm always kind of taking in different stuff, whether it's superhero stuff or genre stuff, creator-owned books. I think it's really valuable to sort of be taking the temperature of the market, what's happening and why, and who's on the upswing and what's going on. If you love this stuff and you're a part of this industry, then you want to support as much of it as humanly possible. Matt Rosenberg's new book, We're Taking Everyone Down With Us. That is one of the best first issues I have read in ages. I read that first issue and I was, it's good when you're just jealous the minute you finish it and you're just like, damn, I wish I'd come up with that. That is such a smart, playful, joyous, like well-tuned, well-paced, sharp premiere. And you're like, I know Matt, I've known him for years. And so it's like, we're used to kind of taking the piss and joking with each other. And I couldn't even pretend to make fun of him. I was just like, dude, this is some of the best stuff you've ever written. And I am absolutely locked in for, future issues. And he was like, and the sarcastic part is, and I'm like, there's no sarcasm. You crushed it. And I'm super proud of you. And may we all have such strong first issues. You know what I mean? Like that's the kind of fun thing about being in this business, is you get to know people and you get to kind of hopefully, build out things that you're proud of and get to see other people making the stuff they're proud of. Charles Soule and I, we became really close friends early in our careers. And then watching that guy become Mr. Star Wars and Daredevil and, just that's been such a fun, ride. And I'm so proud of him and so excited to see what he's doing down the line as well.
Absolutely. Well, so Jim, we're coming up on time. And
Sure.
so thank you so much for joining us. We really do
No problem.
appreciate it. So before we go, we just wanted to know, in terms of for anyone watching and whatnot, if they want to interact with you, what is the best social media and things
Sure.
that you're on, that people can check out what
So
you're
the
doing?
good thing is it's actually really, really simple. So if you ever want to find out about my work, you just literally go to jimzub.com. So JIMZUB.com. That's where there's links for all my books, my biography. I have an archive of blog posts that literally go back 26 years because it's my original live journal that I ported over to my own website. There are dozens of tutorials that I put up there, old blog posts about how to write comics, how to pitch your own stories, how to work with artists and editors, what I've learned about publishing over the past 20 plus years. And it's all in that one spot, along with links to my social media, your Twitter, your Blue Sky, your Instagram, and all that kind of stuff. I've got a Patreon where I have a deep archive of my work. So if you want to compare the published work to what I wrote and the stages that it went through with editors, you can literally dig through over 300 scripts that I have in my archive that you can go through on Patreon for the price of a fancy coffee. And so everything is in that one spot. You can sign up for the Zubstack, which is my Substack newsletter that gives you a weekly kind of rundown on what I'm working on and what I'm thinking about and what I'm enjoying, what I'm reading, what video games I'm playing, and what role-playing games or board games are hitting my table.
What video games are you playing?
So my wife has fallen in deep on Cult of the Lamb. And so we've
Me
been sort of
too.
going through that on multiplayer where she'll play through and do most of the management on the cult. I'd already finished the game previously, but now she's kind of got her own game going. And I'll jump in because they have a multiplayer option where I can literally play the goat and I'll just pop in and help her kill a bunch of stuff on a dungeon or things like that, which has been a lot of fun. We started playing
Both
just
of
on the
them.
weekend. There's this really neat, it's almost like it is like a digital board game. It's called Thunderfolk. And so you actually play on your PlayStation or on your computer, but then you use your phone as your controller. And I thought it was just going to be gimmicky, but it's actually really good. And it feels like playing a digital board game with a deck of cards and all sorts of fun stuff. We really enjoyed that. I just played an indie game. It came out years ago, but I think I must have grabbed it on a Steam sale and I finally installed it. It's called What Remains of Edith Finch. And it's like this weird, it's about 2.5 hours, the whole game, but you just explore this creepy old house and you find out the story of this funky old family. And it's all about loss and love and unsaid things before you die. And it's oddly touching and poignant and strange. 2.5 hours, you're done, and you'll feel like you got your money's worth because it's such an interesting, atmospheric, kind of trippy experience.
That was a
And if
good one.
people tell you that, video games can't be art, then they're wrong. And you can just point towards this. So those are a few of the most recent ones that I've been digging into. On the gaming front, I'm always playing a host of different board games and role-playing games. There's this tragic, wonderful role-playing game called Mothership that's basically sci-fi horror, but it's almost always a tragedy. And I've been running a few of those scenarios for my friends, and they are loving it. And it's so that's one of the ones that has recently hit the table for us, and we've been having a ball.
Nice. Do you do like Oblivion? The remaster just came out.
I have not picked it up yet. One of the difficulties is just with my schedule, doing games where I've got that long kind of commitment. Like I would love to play, any of the Elder Scrolls stuff again. Obviously, I dug into them when they originally came out, but I know that way lies madness. That is tens of hours that I just don't have to put into it. So I'm trying to hit stuff that's on the shorter end of things, and then when I get through a whole spate of deadlines and then convention travel, hopefully I'll have some more time to kind of dig into some longer kind of stuff. But it can be tough. Like even when I was playing Baldur's Gate 3 for research, because I was doing a tie-in comic for the series, it was hard to find that time and to make sure you're hitting your deadline and somehow get that work-life balance figured out. And so it can be hard. Like, when my wife and I first started dating, we really enjoyed stuff like World of Warcraft and massive multiplayer games. but that kind of time commitment is just really, really difficult. One of my buddies, he and his kids have fallen in deep on Marvel Rivals, and he's like, you got to play, it's free. And I was like, oh, no, not because I don't want to, and not because I don't think it's cool, but when Overwatch first came out, I fell in hard on that, and I was playing a lot. And it's like, I know you've got the Overwatch style play and you have the Marvel characters that I love. Kiss productivity goodbye. And so I am avoiding that, like, not because no one did a good job. I think for the exact opposite reason. I know I would be absolutely sucked into it. And then my editors are going to be scratching at the door for the latest script. So it's that balancing act, and if I've got a choice between playing a solo video game or even an online video game versus, in-person time with my friends or family, or cooking a nice meal and sharing that with friends, I'm going to try and choose the in-person experience, because staring at a screen, working on scripts or looking at art, I get enough screen time as it is,
Fair enough.
It is a soul.
My last MMO.
Oh, I was just going to
Sorry.
say one recommendation for you real quick. Black Myth Wukong.
Oh, yeah. I love the Souls games, and I love third-person action RPG. So, yeah, I'm definitely keeping an eye out. I saw the footage. It looks amazing. I know it's really good. So
Really good. The story is amazing. It's a
Cool.
shorter game, but yeah, it is difficult, though.
Sweet. During the pandemic stuff, I fell in hard on the Souls games, and I was obsessed. Bloodborne and Sekiro. Obviously a couple years ago, Elden Ring, when that came out, I platinumed them. I was
wow.
very, very obsessed. Yeah.
Nice. Sorry, Kari. You get the last question there, and then we'll wrap it up.
Oh, no, I didn't have a question. I was just going to talk about how horrible I am with my time management skills when I game, so I'm not allowed to anymore.
Okay.
So you get one more question, Leo, because you haven't asked.
No. Actually, we talked about
MJ?
video games for 5
MJ, do
minutes.
you have
It's been
anything?
great.
I'm just saying, I'm currently playing South of Midnight and I'm really enjoying it.
Oh, cool. Nice.
And then,
Yeah, I've got between my reading list and my gaming list, my Steam install list, where I buy a bunch of stuff on sale, and then I'm just like, oh no, I should probably try these. I've got a wish list that is horrifically long. So
There you go. All right.
Jim, yeah, totally. Thank you for your time this evening. It's
thank
great.
you.
Appreciated.
Excelsior!